In April 2026, a spring snowstorm sealed off Highway 63 in northern Alberta, the only road connecting Fort McMurray to the rest of the province. Within hours, nearly 400 vehicles sat frozen in place, snow piling into drifts over a meter high, swallowing the road until drivers couldn't tell where the asphalt ended and the ditch began. Some people were stuck for 15 hours, others for almost 24. And inside one of those vehicles, a stranded driver said something to a reporter that captures the exact dilemma at the heart of this video. You start to get cold, and then you start questioning whether to turn the engine back on, knowing it's just going to burn more fuel to get warm again. That hesitation, engine on or engine off, is a decision regular drivers stumble into by accident during one bad storm. For professional truckers running freight through Canada's most punishing winter routes, it's not an accident. It's a calculation they make on purpose, sometimes multiple times a night, in conditions that make Highway 63's nightmare look mild by comparison. Picture this instead. A tractor-trailer parked alone on the Dempster Highway, the gravel route connecting Yukon to the Northwest Territories, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest town. No other headlights. No cell signal. The thermometer reads 63 degrees Celsius, real air temperature, not wind chill. And the driver inside is staring at the ignition, trying to decide whether keeping the engine running is keeping them alive or quietly working against them. Here's why that question isn't simple. At 63 degrees, exposed skin can develop frostbite in under 30 seconds, faster than it takes to read this sentence aloud. Diesel fuel starts fighting back too. Anti-gel additives, the chemical treatments that keep diesel from solidifying in cold weather, are typically rated to protect fuel down to about 50 degrees C. At 63 degrees C, you're already 13 degrees past where that protection is guaranteed to hold. Wax crystals can start forming inside the fuel lines anyway, clogging filters fine enough to choke off fuel flow within minutes. And if the engine stalls here, in this kind of cold, restarting it might not happen until the storm itself decides to let up. So keeping the engine running feels like the obvious move. It is for a while. But it comes with a cost that adds up fast. A heavy diesel engine idling for warmth burns roughly 1 to 1.5 gallons of fuel per hour. Stretch that across a 12-hour storm and you've burned 12 to 18 gallons just sitting still. Now multiply that by a fleet of 300 trucks getting hit by the same storm system across a single winter, and you're looking at a fuel bill that climbs into the millions of dollars, spent on nothing but staying warm. That's the gap auxiliary power units were built to close. An APU is a small secondary engine mounted behind the cab that can run independently of the main diesel engine, sipping as little as 1/10 of a gallon per hour while still keeping the cabin livable. On paper, it's the obvious upgrade. Shut down the engine that's bleeding fuel. Let the APU carry the load instead. Except machines fail, and cold is exactly where machines fail first. APUs are smaller, often built by a different manufacturer than the truck itself, and they don't always carry the same cold-rated engineering as the main engine block, a component specifically designed and pressure-tested to survive deep sub-zero conditions for the life of the truck. Hand your survival over to a smaller, less battle-tested system, and you're betting it won't seize up at the exact hour it matters most. Veteran drivers have their own private rule for this. Some say below 45 degrees C, the main engine stays on, no exceptions, because restarting a stalled engine in that cold might not be possible at all. Others trust their APU completely because they've watched it outlast the main engine on 3 separate winters, on 3 separate near misses they don't talk about much. And that's the part that almost never gets said out loud. This isn't a settled debate with a textbook answer. It's a judgment call made alone at night by someone watching the fuel gauge drop while the wind outside is strong enough to rock an 18-ton trailer on its axles. Ask 10 drivers their personal cutoff temperature for switching the main engine off, and you'll hear everything from 35° to never, not once, not ever. And both answers come from people who've spent decades on roads where being wrong isn't an inconvenience. It's the difference between making it home and becoming a name in a report nobody outside the industry ever reads. So picture that driver again, alone on the Dempster, watching the temperature gauge, hand resting near the key. Whatever they choose, engine running or APU carrying the load, they're about to walk straight into a danger that has nothing to do with fuel and everything to do with what's quietly happening outside, where the snow is already starting to build up against the exhaust pipe. Here's what almost never makes it into this conversation. It doesn't matter which choice that driver made. Engine running or APU humming along, they've just created the exact same hidden danger. Snow piling against a parked truck during a whiteout, the kind of drift that buried Highway 63 to over a meter in a single night, can seal an exhaust pipe completely in under 2 hours. And once that happens, the source of the warm air filling the cab stops mattering. Carbon monoxide has no smell, no color, no taste. It doesn't announce itself. It just fills a sealed cab through door seals and floor mounts that are normally completely harmless, while the person inside falls asleep certain that the running engine is the thing keeping them alive. This is the actual leading cause of death among drivers stranded in extreme cold on Canadian winter routes. Not freezing, but quietly losing consciousness from a gas they never saw coming. It's why professional drivers on these routes train themselves to do something that sounds almost irrational. Step outside into 63°C air every 30 to 60 minutes through the night, just to brush snow off the tailpipe with a bare gloved hand they can barely feel after the second or third trip, leaving the warmth to make sure the warmth isn't killing them. It's the same rule whether the heat is coming from the main engine or the APU everyone argues about, because carbon monoxide doesn't care which side of that debate you're on. And that's where the real disagreement gets sharper, because it's not actually about whether carbon monoxide is dangerous. Everyone agrees on that part. It's about which setup makes that 30-minute check easier to keep up for 6, 8, 10 hours straight, when exhaustion sets in and every part of a person's body is begging them to stay inside. Drivers who favor APUs point out their exhaust outlets often sit lower, closer to where snow actually drifts, meaning they can clog faster than a main engine's exhaust, which sits higher and pushes exhaust out with more force. Drivers who keep the main engine running argue the opposite, that the sheer power of a full diesel engine partially clears light snow on its own, something a smaller fuel-sipping APU was never built to do. Neither side has won that argument industry-wide, and it probably never gets settled because it's not really a mechanical question anymore at that point. It's also psychological. Total whiteout, when blowing snow erases the horizon, the road, even the sky, leaving nothing but white in every direction, can disorient a person badly enough that their judgment stops being reliable. A driver who slept 4 hours in 2 days watching a fuel gauge they can't stop checking, surrounded by nothing but featureless white for the 8th hour straight, is not thinking with the same clarity they'd have on a clear night with a horizon to look at. This is why veteran drivers build rigid personal routines into a storm, checking the clock instead of trusting instinct, talking on the radio even when there's nothing urgent to say, Because the real goal isn't just staying warm, it's staying clear-headed enough to keep doing the boring, repetitive, freezing task of checking that tailpipe hour after hour, when every nerve in their body is arguing for the opposite. Which brings this back, full circle, to that one moment that started this whole story. A stranded driver on Highway 63, hand near the key, wondering whether turning the engine back on is worth what it costs. Multiply that hesitation by -40 degrees. Strip away the other 400 vehicles, the volunteers handing out coffee, the helicopter overhead. Put that same person utterly alone on a gravel road in the Yukon at 63 degrees, and that small human moment of doubt becomes a decision with no easy answer, made over and over through a single long night by someone whose only company is a radio that might not even pick up a signal out there. So if you ask which approach is right, engine running or APU engaged, the honest answer is that experienced drivers still disagree, and that disagreement isn't a flaw in the system. It's the truest sign of how close this entire situation sits to the edge of what fuel, machinery, and a tired human being can actually control once the temperature drops far enough that nothing behaves exactly the way it's rated to on paper. Next time you see a transport truck idling alone on a highway shoulder during a storm, headlights barely cutting through the snow, there's a real chance the person inside has already run this exact calculation. Fuel cost against mechanical risk against the silent threat sitting just behind the rear bumper, and made a call that another driver, somewhere else on that same long, frozen stretch of road, would have made completely differently.